Welcome to Unsafe Space. I'm your co-host, Carter Laren, and I'm joined as normal by Keri Smith. Say hi, Keri. There she is.
Hi, Carter. How are you?
I'm all right. We have a bit of an impromptu interview today. We have the opportunity to speak with Gabriel Rench, and we're going to bring him on the show in just a second. Gabriel is a Latah County Commission candidate, and he was arrested yesterday and charged with not social distancing because actually in the city of Moscow, which I'm not making up, there's a city of Moscow in the United States, and charging people with not social distancing. So welcome to America. But he was arrested at a Palm Sing. I think there was about 150 people there. Or Psalm Sing. I'm sorry, I said Palm. A Psalm Sing, about 150 people there. He was arrested for not social distancing. Gabriel is a media and marketing consultant, co-founder of the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network, and one of the hosts of CrossPolitic show and podcast, which airs on DirecTV streaming and on podcasts. The CrossPolitic show, which is about Christ over politics, mixes the taboo formula of faith, culture, and politics in order to bring clarity of the gospel into the muddled America. The show has interviewed notable presidential candidates, including Senator Ted Cruz and Dr. Ben Carson, political cultural leaders Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro, and social figures including Alveda King. CrossPolitic show airs on NRB TV and DirecTV primetime on Friday nights at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, and it streams live every Sunday night on YouTube and Facebook at 7 p.m. Pacific. And the podcast drops on Wednesday and Monday mornings. He also serves as a deacon at his church, which is Christ Church, and on various nonprofit boards. He lives on a small 10-acre farm with his wife, 3 children, a couple of horses, 1 dog, and 2 outdoor cats. And you can follow him on Twitter at GMWrench, that's RENCH, and on Facebook at GWrench. We'll put the links to those below. And you can follow CrossPolitic on Facebook and Twitter at CrossPolitic, and we will, again, put those links below. Long introduction, but Gabriel, thank you for joining us today on Unsafe Space.
Thank you for having me. I need to update that bio. I almost fell asleep.
It's just, maybe you're just very impressive and you've got a long resume and it all needs to be there. That's fine. I even edited it, by the way. That's not even the full bio.
No, I need to update it big time. Thanks for having me on. My wife, Keri, my wife, Annie, oh my gosh, likes Keri and likes y'all show and has had a lot of fun listening to y'all show. So we originally found out about you guys, I don't know, 5 months ago or something. So it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Wow. Well, thank you. I found out about you last night because I saw these videos going around of you being arrested and of 2 other worshipers with you being arrested. And there's something about the juxtaposition of the police officers making the arrests, but the calmness and the serenity of your crowd, of your fellow worshipers. And I think it's very moving to watch. So before you tell us a little bit about what happened, for anyone who hasn't seen it, could we play one of those videos, Carter?
Yes, I will do my technical best to play a video now for you. So, here we go.
Blessings fall, praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy.
There you have it.
That's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
You back? All right. Yeah, we're back. There you go. Did that work? Everyone saw it and heard it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gabe, tell us a little bit. I've been doing a lot of research since last night. I found out about your show, CrossPolitic, which looks amazing. I think that there are a lot of people in our audience who are probably are already in your audience or may be interested in listening to your show. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and the events that led up to yesterday?
Yeah, the short of it, I was actually born in the great promised land of Texas, and now I live in Idaho. Over a couple states, a couple states later, I'm in Idaho. I came here to finish my school at University of Idaho, which is Moscow. It's Moscow and Latah County. And so I came here to go to University of Idaho in 2002, graduated in 2005. I married my wife the same year I graduated. She's pretty much a local here, grew up here pretty much all her life. And now we got 3 fun kids. My kids, when I came home last night, so I was in jail for about 2 hours. I got home about 9 o'clock at night, and my kids are in bed, and they're supposed to be in bed by 8:30, and they're pretty good at falling asleep, but they couldn't fall asleep. They had to wait for daddy because he'd been in jail. And my wife told me that when she told our kids that I was in jail, my oldest said, "Well, can I ride our horses right now then?" Because I wasn't coming home for a little bit. My second one said, "This is stupid." And then my young son, he's my 6-year-old. He said, "If I was a cop, I would punch those cops in the nose." So, anyways, I host a CrossPolitic TV show and podcast, and it's we started this 4 years ago with my buddies Chuck Knox and Pastor Toby, because the church doesn't address politics. The church doesn't speak about it, and so we wanted to start a show, a conversation that specifically discipled Christians on how to think about politics, everything, all the way down to what happened last week in the latest news, or what happened in Kentucky. So we started that. God's been kind. It's blown up. And I think the cops accidentally arrested the wrong person yesterday.
Yeah. You think it was an accident?
Well, I believe in the sovereignty of God. I don't think anything's ultimately a random accident like an atheist would. But
touche. Well, just to be clear, I don't think it was an accident either, but for different reasons.
You have an exception. That's great. And so, what happened? I'll just kind of go through the story of what happened. So this resolution's actually been around since July 2nd. And the resolution is, if you can't social distance, you need to wear a mask. So if you can't be arbitrary 6 feet apart, you have to wear a mask. And so we've actually done a number of these psalm things throughout July and August. I think just a couple here and there, just to keep kind of trying to push things and claim the center on the issue. And on last Monday night, they voted, our council voted to extend the order through January 5th. It's just unbelievable.
The mask mandate.
The mask mandate, that's correct. The resolution till January 5th. And so what happened was, and that night, City Council, overwhelmingly, for the hours of comments and testimony, everyone was against it. Only 2 people in the hours of testimony and comments were for the resolution. So they weren't listening to the people of Moscow. And so they extended the resolution through January 5th. And secondly, there's just so much to talk about. I'm probably jumping ahead here. But there's no pandemic here in our county. No one's died from this, and there's been no hospitalizations, 0 hospitalizations. Our local hospital is virtue signaling with a tent that's been set up since this whole pandemic's been going on. There's still a tent in the parking lot at our hospital. And no hospitalizations from this. And so the science and the eyes that the eyeballs that people are looking at through all this is just, it's insane what's going on. So they extended the resolution through January 5th, and then the next morning, this is Tuesday morning, so our psalm sing was on Wednesday. Tuesday morning, I emailed our chief of police. I have a relationship with them. We've actually had him on our show. I've been into his office to talk about various issues. He's a good Christian man. And I emailed him Tuesday morning and I said, this is your Daniel moment to protect the citizens from tyranny. Your job is to protect the citizens. Your job is to serve the citizens, not the mayor. And we have constitutional rights that you need to be protecting, that you swore to protect. And I said, this is your Daniel moment. Don't be like Peter, the Apostle Peter, and run away when Christ is being sacrificed. And so that was my Tuesday email, not knowing. I mean, I didn't even know the psalm sing was going to happen yet that morning. So we coordinate the psalm sing on Tuesday. Everyone gathers at the city hall, on Moscow City Hall. It's just there's a big parking lot next to City Hall, to sing psalms, sing three songs, and then with the doxology. So really sing 4 songs. And so we all start gathering around on Tuesday night at 4:45. I just came from a meeting. I'm walking up, and everyone's starting to get close together. The cops tell my pastor, who is leading the psalm sing, the cops tell my pastor that if people don't social distance or wear a mask, then they could be cited and or arrested. So my pastor relayed that before he started singing psalms. He's like, "Hey, everybody, the cops just told me this is what they're going to do. You know, do it at your own risk. Do what your conscience tells you to do right here." And no one really social distance. No one really moved. People didn't really spread out. It was kind of a funny moment. And so I
noticed they had circles paint. I'm sorry to interrupt. In the video, maybe it's the one of you being arrested, or it might have been that one. I saw circles painted on the ground. Did you guys do that, or did they do those?
So the last couple months, the city council meetings have been pretty intense. A lot of people have been showing up, and so they painted those dots in the parking lot so people could social distance, and the cops could write tickets if people weren't social distancing or wearing masks. And so it was kind of an objective way for them to prove that they could write a ticket. And so they did that originally for the city council meetings. And so when we got there, obviously they were already on the pavement, but they had booted all the cars out of the parking lot and put signs up so cars couldn't drive in the parking lot. So they had prepared for us to come and sing psalms in the parking lot. And so on Wednesday, we all gather around. I was the closest on the edge of the crowd to the cops. And so it was just easy. So this is where it was random in one sense, where they just walked up to me because I was just the closest to them. And so they weren't singling me out in that sense. And so the cops came up to my mom first, who was standing next to me. And the cop asked my mom, "Are you with this gentleman?" My mom said, "Yes, this is my son." And so I immediately put my arm around my buddy Tyler, and I said, "But this is my friend." And so when I did that, that's when they said, "Can I see your driver's license?" I said, "Officer, you don't need to do this." And he said, please provide your driver's license." I said, "Officer, you know better. You know this isn't right. You don't need to do this." And he said, again, please provide your ID. And I said, "Officer, I have a constitutional right to worship without you infringing on my rights." And he said to me, he's like, "Look, I don't want to arrest you." And I said, "Then don't." What I should have said is like, "Well, hey, join us in psalm singing then. Join me." But I didn't. I should have said that. And then so he asked me again for proof of identification, to provide identification because he wanted to write me a citation for disobeying the mask order and social distancing order. And I said, "Officer, you don't need to do this, man." And he said, "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I'm going to arrest you." So he asked me one more time, and I again just repeated the same stuff. And he arrested me. And as he was arresting me, my all these people, it wasn't just my church. There's more people beyond my church. Obviously, my church dominated the crowd, but my people behind me basically were singing Psalm 20, this glorious version of Psalm 20. And so I'm getting arrested. You hear the clicks of the handcuffs on me, and the singing is just glorious. And then the chief of police is right behind the arresting officer, and I look at him and I said, "This was your Daniel moment."
Yeah.
And pretty powerful moment there. And so they walked me off. They walked me to the patrol car, which is probably about 60 feet, 70 feet away from the crowd. All the cameras follow me. I mean, there's so many multiple camera angles of everything that happened. All the cameras follow me over there. I tell the camera guys, "Don't get arrested. Just keep filming." And then my brother walks over. You probably saw this video. My brother walks into the scene. My brother's always late, by the way, wherever he goes. So this is the perfect timing for him. And he walks over and he says, "This is bullshit, officers. This is unbelievable," and just starts going off on the officers. My associate pastor, was walking up at the same time as the officers were taking me over to the car. My associate pastor starts getting into the police officers like, "This is unconstitutional. You know better. You need to be living with your conscience, not believing these lies." I mean, just my past, it was glorious. Like I don't know if you guys saw my stream last night, but one of my buddies brought up in the stream that, what a beautiful pastor who's there defending his congregation as he's getting arrested and not leaving you, like the Apostle Peter did. And so you guys can interrupt me anytime. I'll keep going.
I've got a quick question, actually, before we continue. I mean, why is there a presumption that you have an ID? This is the United States of America. You're not required to carry your papers with you when you are around. What's the justification for arresting you for not having an ID? I don't understand this.
Well, basically resisting arrest.
So by saying you're not giving your ID, that's resisting arrest. That's convenient.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I never even said I wasn't going to give my ID. I never acknowledged the question. All I said was, officer, you don't need to be doing this.
Right.
So I never even acknowledged if I had an ID or not. He didn't even know if I had an ID or not. I just ignored the question because it was wrong I wasn't even going to entertain that process.
Right. And have you spoken with the chief of police since then?
No, definitely waiting for a call of apology for sure.
Keep waiting, I think.
Do you think that's going to, a call of apology is likely?
It eventually will, and once the court case is all run through, it will be. I think it'll be likely, but right now, I mean, I would be surprised because one of the things that's driving all this is the pride of our city council and our mayor, the arrogance of them to mandate such a petty legislation. And so when you challenge that petty legislation, well, you aren't obeying your civil authorities. And so what happens is pride kicks in because you need to make sure that people submit. And so I think eventually, once the pride kind of calms down, once the arrogance kind of goes out of the room, I think I'll get some apologies.
I have a question about the town, the city council, the mayor. Well, first, an observation. I saw on your feed that the mayor, who is supporting this mask mandate being extended through January, himself recently this month presided over a wedding without a mask.
Yeah.
I saw the photo of him.
Yeah.
So
part of the problem here is whenever you create this kind of tyrannical, petty legislation, it's actually kind of hard to enforce. And so it becomes very partial. It becomes very arbitrary in how you enforce it. It's bad governance is really what it kind of goes down to when you create these kind of petty tyrannical laws. And then obviously the mayor doesn't, he through his actions, he doesn't really believe we're in a pandemic. Else he would be wearing a mask. He was at a party on September 2nd with more than 50 people there, not social distancing, not wearing a mask. So he doesn't really believe we're in a pandemic. He doesn't really believe masks work even by his own actions. But and then, of course, you have the added thing that he's happy to enforce and create a law where he has one standard for his citizens and another standard for himself. I mean, he shut down our economy on March 20th. He created a resolution telling our businesses to shut down. All our local businesses to shut down. We lost over 2,000 jobs due to his shutdown here on March 20th. It's unbelievable. And while he tells my buddy who's a restaurant owner in downtown to shut down, you can't provide for your wife, you can't provide for your employees, you can't provide for your own family, and then he has the gall to keep his own tax-funded paycheck. Jesus has all sorts of words for guys like this. You create one standard for people, for the sheep, and then you yourself, you Pharisee, go off and have another standard. It's absolutely atrocious. And our governor of Idaho did the same thing. I mean, how many? You're in California. I mean, how many standards have they created for the people, and yet they themselves refuse? I mean, you got Nancy Pelosi, hair salon gal, who blames the setup. She blames I was set up.
Right.
Oh,
the hair salon. It was a sting operation. The hair
fault.
salon was trying to get her. Yeah. Well, you gotta understand though. This is the purpose of laws, right? The purpose of one way that tyrants or want to be tyrants. In the case of your town, I would say the mayor is like an aspiring tyrant. One way that they can do this is if you have so many laws that at any one time all of the citizens are everyone's violating something, then you can just arrest people that you don't like for political reasons, whatever, because there's no expectation that you arrest everyone, and there's always some justified reason for it. And I think we're at a point now where we've traded so much liberty for security, and we've allowed so many laws to encroach even our local laws all over the country that basically at any given moment anyone can be arrested for anything. You just have to get on the wrong side of the police officers or the mayor.
You're probably disobeying 5 laws right now.
Right.
I mean, you're exactly right. This is what tyranny does: is it puts everybody on constant, some sort of, potential house arrest every day. And we need to, I mean, our government, I'm in a conservative state, bro. I'm in the state of Idaho. We're 70% Republican.
Right.
So I just recently did I was lucky I got to do a road trip for the past month, and I visited Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, Idaho. Idaho, out of every state I went to, was the most normal. And I went up to Priest Lake, and nobody was wearing masks. I couldn't tell coronavirus had happened. Plus, Idaho has one of the lowest infection rates. And so when I heard this was in Idaho, I was a little shocked. Why do you think this? What is it about your town, about Moscow, that makes this something that could happen there compared to the sort of lax atmosphere I felt in the rest of the state?
That's a great question. What is so the odd thing about Idaho, like I said, is pretty much 70% Republican. I live in a university town, and in a university town, it's dominated by liberals. And so I am Latah County, and there's one other county in the state of Idaho that tends to vote Democrat in presidential races. And I live in one of those two counties that do that in Idaho. So we are a liberal city. The city of Moscow is liberal. The county's not. So I'm bad for liberals. I'm good for the county kind of thing. The county actually is super supportive of all this. And actually, I can't tell you how many locals have changed their mind or have been kind of won over through this whole process. And so I pray that God is changing our county, changing our city. And but that's the dynamic of what's going on, is that we're in a university town. And so our mayor, who's probably some sort of fiscally, roughly conservative, sort of. I mean, he's a liberal. He really is. But he has done some good things for businesses, and sometimes liberals can do that, and it's surprising. And our city council overwhelmingly is liberal in all this. And I've had exchanges with some of the city council who disagree with the mayor but will not speak publicly. And we really have cowards in leadership in our city council. So, but is what it is. So that's why I think we're experiencing some of these weird moments with masks and social distancing, is because it's being driven by liberals and actually not by true conservatism. Although our governor, who's a conservative governor, he shut down the economy and had like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 kind of things. And I think one of the stages he required to wear a mask in that stage. And obviously he's been touting wearing a mask throughout the state. But you go to northern Idaho. So I'm an hour and a half from Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, north. So you go north to Spokane, Coeur d'Alene from here. But once you get to Coeur d'Alene and above, I mean, it is free country up there. They are fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that one lesson here that I think I would really like conservatives to learn, or at least maybe get some education on this, is something that gives me heartburn is to see the people on the right who, because the left is saying ridiculous things like all cops are bastards and defund the police, and like they're saying outlandish things. The right tends to be unquestionably supportive of law enforcement, and if you value your liberties, it's law enforcement that will enforce those laws against you. And unless you've got law enforcement who will stand up and not be the Peter, to use your metaphor, then and to be the David, then really the cops aren't the friends that you think they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's more background to the story. What happened was the mayor's resolution took effect back in July 2nd. So you had to wear a mask or social distance starting in July 2nd. Well, there was at least one Black Lives Matter protest, I think possibly up to 3 that happened after July. I don't remember all the timing of the 3 Black Lives Matter protests, but at least one happened after July 2nd, and they didn't social distance, and some of them weren't wearing masks, and so they were, got away. They were happy to do that. But what happened? So my black co-host, Chocolate Knox, his wife called our chief of police while this pressure, this Black Lives Matter Marxist pressure was going on in our town, and she said, "You do not." And she left a message because he didn't answer. She said, "You do not apologize. You do not apologize to Black Lives Matter. You have nothing to apologize for. You're a great police chief." Just went down the list on this voicemail with our chief of police. And then he never called her back, because what he did was he got gifts and went to her house and gave her and the kids gifts. And then he wanted to do a photo op with her. A freaking photo op because he wanted to show, hey, look, I got black support in my town. And then he has the nerve to show up to my church exercising our First Amendment rights while we supported him through Black Lives Matter. We were there for the police. And then all of a sudden, we're the bad guys. I'm going to arrest you because you aren't social distancing and you aren't wearing a mask and you're worshiping God. Or you're exercising your First Amendment rights. It's pretty crazy. And as I haven't gone through the whole. Go ahead.
Also, just how condescending, because she was offering her heartfelt support, and then for someone to turn that into, can I use you because of your race, is really condescending. It's like, would you ask me this if I were white? I don't know. Like, would he have asked for the photo op? That stuff grosses me out, because then you just make it's like the relationship becomes awkward and you're being used. Like, that's bizarre. Anyway, that's just my thought on that.
Knox told his wife, don't do the photo op. So she did not do the photo op.
Yeah.
So did you try, when the cops were coming to arrest you, did you try thrusting your fist into the air and yelling Black Lives Matter and see if that made a difference?
Well, if I was holding a Molotov cocktail, I might have been okay. Or if I shot a cop, I might have gotten away with it.
Yeah. See, you just don't know how to worship properly, man. That's all it is. You're not saying the right words.
Yeah, man, you're becoming a Christian, Carter. I can tell you that right now.
Carter is very friendly. Carter, I don't know if you know this, but is on record on our show saying that he would rather live in a Christian theocracy than a Marxist one.
Oh, yeah. I stand by that.
Absolutely.
I stand by that. I mean, who the hell wouldn't?
Absolutely. Yeah. When oftentimes, not Carter, but atheists, when I get in debate with them, they start making fun of Leviticus. How much more would I rather be under Leviticus right now than the petty, tyrannical Levitical laws that we're under our mayor?
Right.
It's a Levitical law. Don't wear you must wear a mask. That's a petty law. The Bible's law, God's law is good. Our laws are tyrannical. Our laws are petty. Our laws are arbitrary. There's a logic to God's law. So of course, absolutely.
Let me ask you a question about your church and your background, and because one of the things that impressed me about the video, aside from the peace that I felt watching it of everyone continuing to sing, was the crowd. The size of the crowd was amazing, and I felt this is an example of a church that, and I know not everyone in the crowd was from your church, but this is an example of, in my opinion, a church that's alive. And why is it that you think, I expected at the beginning of, especially the lockdown orders where they were not allowing churches to have services in some states, and in some states they're still not allowing people to get together and worship. I expected to see more civil disobedience, peaceful protests from Christians, and I'm a pretty new Christian. I just assumed that I would see people pushing back against that, and I've seen it in isolated cases, and your case being one of them. But why do you think it is that a lot of churches are complying?
There's so much layers to this question. Ultimately, our pastors are cowards, and so they don't lead well. But what has happened is the church has been compromising for about a century and a half now, or maybe even longer. The church, especially this last century, you can see all the compromises. Now, there might be some disagreement here on this, but I think it's biblical, and I'm glad to back this up. But I'm just going to make the statements and walk through it. The church was allowing women in the pulpits long before we were putting our women in F-14 fighter pilot cockpits, F-15s kind of thing. The church was allowing divorce to happen in the church long before homosexuality was getting a grip on our culture and our society. The church was kicking kids out of worship service. We'd create a secondary worship service for little children. Hey, mom and dad are going to do real church here. You go over here and do fake church. And so the kids were being kicked out of worship long before kids were being boarded in their mother's wombs. So we taught the world every step of the way how to rebel against God. And that's why we have no moral courage to actually stand up. Now, secondly, related to this, the church does not disciple and teach the Bible. The church is embarrassed of certain verses. You can go, Carter, you know this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with anything you've said so far. So, Yeah.
No, I know. I'm just agreeing that I know that you know that I know what you know. Uh, and so the church is embarrassed of chunks and sections of the Bible, and I think all of God's word is beautiful. All of God's word is good. And is there? Do we need to learn how to maybe understand it better, or? But the first thing is I believe it. I believe every single verse you put before me. I believe it. Now I need to understand it in context, and I need to be able to interpret it well and rightly and faithful to the text. But I'm not embarrassed of any of the Bible. But what's related to this is the church has not taught. So this is at the heart of the issue here. The Bible, God gave us three forms of government. Okay, there's the church government, there's the family government, and there's the civil government. They're all created by God in scriptures. The civil government you see in Romans 13, the family government you see in Ephesians 5 and Genesis chapter 1, the church government you see in Matthew 18, you see in the book of Acts, you see this church government being created. You see Acts chapter 6, 1 Timothy chapter 3. So God created these three governments. And if you look at them, basically each government has orders from God. So the church reports to God, the civil government reports to God, and the family government reports to God. God defined the civil government. God gave the definition. God created the government, and the definition of the civil government is that they're responsible to keep the peace and exercise the sword, right? Keep the peace, exercise the sword. It's defined, it's basic. The family government, the definition of the family government, they're responsible, I'm responsible, me and my wife are responsible for the health, education, and welfare of my family. Now, everyone thinks when I say that, they think, oh, the government's responsible for that. Health, education, and welfare. We got departments named that. No, it's the family that's responsible for the health, education, and welfare of their kids, of their family, of their mom and dad who are getting older and retiring. It's the family. The church's responsibility, they're responsible to preach the gospel, to administer the sacraments of baptism and the Lord's Supper, and to follow through with church discipline. So the church has its own form of discipline. A man cheats on his wife, and if he doesn't repent, he deserves to be excommunicated. He deserves to be kicked out of the church. So if we don't define those three governments biblically, then you're going to get chaos. You're going to get family feudal governmental systems that we've had in the past. You're going to get tyranny that we have here right now from our civil government. You're going to get ecclesiastical governments that start meddling in the civil government's affairs. You can think of historical moments where all these governments went cattywampus, and so the God defined government's roles, family, civil, church roles. He defined them well, and he defined them narrowly. And once you get outside of that, it's just a slippery slope down from there. And Carter, that's actually, I think, a really good argument for why you should be a Christian.
Well, actually, even though we know where we disagree here, I was actually thinking about where I agree with that. And for the other atheists that are watching or in chat, I basically agree with you with what you just said in the sense that for me, it's not the church, but there's philosophy which is teaching how to live, what is right and wrong. It controls your actual objective morality and like what you can and can't do moral wise, how to live your life. It's morality. And the right way to think about family and government is as kind of like subordinate to that in some sense. Like, okay, well, the government needs to do things, but it's not in control of philosophy. The government's it's got a very limited scope. It needs to basically kind of what you said, kind of keep the peace. Okay, like there's very limited scope that you want from an institution. And then in your family, obviously, there's a different way that you need to be, you don't just, the non-aggression principle, for example, isn't sufficient to be a parent. Like there's more you have to do. There's like you're raising children and it's a more complex. In fact, families function, frankly, a little bit more like socialism, where there's shared property and there's shared responsibility. And like it's, you don't want free market families. That's not a way to run a family unit, right? Like there are different domains, and I agree that once you trash what's happened in the West, at least, is we've trashed the church. I mean, we've become very secular. We've trashed the church. My argument is we should replace it with something, but we haven't. So that's the part where we disagree. But I will agree, we've trashed the church, we've trashed that moral foundation, and therefore all that moral stuff starts to bleed into the government starts to take over responsibilities that it shouldn't, and people lean on it to answer questions of right or wrong. They don't know how to run their own families. In fact, the family starts to disintegrate and disappear because there's no clear reason why the family is structured the way it is, because it's not based on anything. And so
Yeah.
I kind of agree with what you're saying, other than the fact that I'm an atheist. Small minor point.
Well, here's where I like you, Carter. You're a good man. Just the one challenge for you in all this, and the one challenge for atheists in general, is you can sign off to a morality, or you have opinions about morality, but you can't account for the truth of morality. You can't account for it. Where does morality come from?
What do you
in
mean
an
by
atheist
account
world?
for it? I just don't. I'm not trying to be an ass. I actually don't understand what you mean by account.
No. You can please. I'll never think of you as being an ass when you challenge me. So feel free. What I mean by how do you account for it? How do you come up with the foundation of where morality comes from? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. And so Dennis Prager's done, I actually did a video in response to Dennis Prager about this particular argument. So, yeah. And I as an atheist, I don't see Christianity as any more or less of an arbitrary assertion than anything else. And my answer to that very broadly is the purpose of philosophy is to teach man how to live on earth. And if you accept that as the purpose, and if you accept that as human flourishing being your goal, if you don't want to accept human flourishing being your goal, and you don't accept that the philosophy is that, then that's okay. You can go off and be evil. But if those are your accepted, you actually can derive very similar ethical and moral rules. But for me, the problem isn't solved by someone saying God said this is the list of rules. That's not objective to me. That's just separately arbitrary. That's where we disagree.
Are you asking Gabe how he defines what's good and evil?
Well, that was one of my responses in all this is you throw out these words, but I'm like, where does the definition come from? Where does the definition of evil come from?
Right. Well, I mean, the definition of evil needs to come from, you need to define what is good, and you need to have a standard. And the question to ask, which is the correct question, is what is the standard? And I think there is some point in philosophy where you do have to make a choice. And I think it's the very beginning of philosophy when you're asking yourself, what's the purpose of this field? We have a branch of study. We're going to study a certain thing. What are we going to study? We're going to study how man should live on Earth. Like, what's the best way for man to live on Earth? And that's a fine answer. You could have a psychopath that's like, I'm not going to study that. I'm going to study how man can suffer on Earth, and I'm going to derive a whole ethical system based on that. And you end up with Stalin, right? But
but you're willing to force your morality on that other guy who doesn't believe in your morality.
I'm failing to force it on him.
Yeah, you're willing. You're willing to.
I'm totally willing to defend myself against people who have anti-life moralities and are willing to use force against me. So, my goal isn't to convert the entire world to have an ethical moral system. If people want to be evil, horrible communists based on my morality, I'm not going to stop them necessarily unless they're bothering me or unless I think they're a threat. In which case, if I can justify in self-defense the use of force, then absolutely I will. But I don't need to go out and convert them if they want to have. I mean, it's not gonna fail. Ultimately, if their morality is not based on human flourishing, they will fail in the end because we're human and we need to flourish. So they lose in the long run.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah.
I think. By the way, this is interesting because Carter and I were joking recently about how atheists and Christians, a lot of atheists and Christians have become very united in the culture war, so we don't have time to argue amongst ourselves anymore. Right. I like that we're creating space for that. But I think the nature of what you guys are talking about as an observer now watching this conversation, there are some Christians who believe, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, Gabe, that even an atheist definition of what is good and evil is derived from Christianity and derived from God. And I think atheists would claim that Christianity is just one system of belief, and there are many other systems of belief which have the same. You can derive that system. You can derive that same definition. You can arrive at that same definition of how man should best live and what is good and evil without being a believer in God. I think that's what an atheist would say, but maybe is this the disagreement we're having? Okay.
I don't know. Go ahead, Gabriel.
I would add.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add in all this. I have presuppositions. Carter has presuppositions. Atheists have presuppositions. Christians have presuppositions, and that's where that's the bottom line of this conversation. So Carter's presupposition is humanism. Carter's presupposition says man invents morality. Man comes up. Man looks at the world and uses his eyes to come up with the best system of morality that allows for human flourishing. So it's a made up morality. And my presupposition is that God created the heavens and the earth, that God created everything, and that all truth is derived from God. And so the argument goes to, okay, well, is Carter's presupposition is, we evolved over millions and millions of years, and somehow chaos turned into order, which is against genetic entropy, against entropy. It's a scientific impossibility in Carter's world, in a evolutionary world, for disorder to turn into order over time. And then and then inside of that, all we are is chemicals. A monkey's just plasma, protoplasm. We're all chemicals. And so why does one chemical get to tell the other chemical what to do in an atheistic worldview? Well, it ends up becoming the majority rules, or some sort of survival of the fittest, or some sort of might makes right morality. That's what happens in Carter's world. And in the Christian world, you actually have a morality that's driven from one source, one truth. It's not driven from millions of different subjective human beings trying to make up a morality, but you have this morality that comes from a God who created the heavens and earth. It's logical, it's systematic, and it protects the vulnerable, and it's there for the vulnerable. Women over centuries have been delivered from oppression because of the Christian faith. Over time, you look at a map of the universe, you roll it out, and you look wherever the gospel has gone, that nation became a first world nation over time. Wherever the Christian gospel has gone, there was a thriving economy that was created, and freedom became more and more. I mean, the history of the world is a struggle to be free from sin, to be free from slavery. Every civilization had slavery or has slavery. Every civilization has oppression or had oppression. Every civilization, and where the gospel has gone, it has largely absolved those problems and created, on top of that, a thriving economy. And so I'm getting past our conversation a little bit to bring it back. Presupposition of what you presuppose is true. Either evolutionary science is true, or the God of this world is true. And so once you figure out what your presupposition is, then that's where I think we can really have the conversation, the debate, because ultimately this comes down to the question, why and who are you?
Yeah, I don't want to get into a huge Christianity argument, but you're misrepresenting. Those are not my presuppositions. Evolution is not necessary to be an atheist at all. I don't care if evolution is true. It's irrelevant. I think it is based on the scientific evidence, but I could be wrong. And if you're an expert on evolution and want to debate me on that, I don't care. I'll concede. That's fine. So those are not the presuppositions. And it's not just because people disagree on something doesn't mean it's moral relativism. I still think there is a correct answer. Just like if I say the earth is round, there can still be flat earth people. They're just wrong. Will I use force to convince them that the earth is round? No. If they're going to shoot me because they believe the earth is flat, then yes, I will defend myself against them. But so long as they're going to have their beliefs over in the corner, I don't have a need to do anything to them, nor do I have the right to do anything to them. But just to be clear, my presuppositions are objective reality exists, and reason is the primary tool of survival for man. That's it. Those are my presuppositions. The end. Nothing else. Doesn't require evolution. Doesn't require anything else. And I believe that Christianity and all other religions are not philosophical. They are a book with a list of rules that are contradictory, were not derived philosophically. They don't use reason as their basis of argument, and they are adopted as if sacred truth and clearly interpreted differently by many people throughout the world. And to me, the argument for Christianity is no different than the argument for Islam. It's no different than the argument for Buddhism. It's no different for the argument for Zeus. All those characters were written in books a long time ago by people, and that is not objective morality. That it's not objective to be able to say, I'm pointing to this book, I've made up a being who's objective, therefore only my reality is objective, or only my rules are objective. Your rules are no more objective than mine, and I would say they're less objective than mine because they're arbitrary. And mine can be debated, yours can't.
Well, you just contradicted yourself because you said there are no objective rules or objective morality that you can point to, and you're making an objective statement.
No, I'm saying there are. I'm saying you can derive, just like science. I would say it's objectively true that the Earth is not flat, right? And you can derive that. You can come to those conclusions, and I think you can do the same for morality. I think mostly atheists have failed to do that throughout history, and I think most of the people who attacked God did so for really horrible reasons and for political reasons, and because they were either nihilists or sadists. And so we're kind of left with a mess philosophically after the destruction of the church. But I do not believe that that doesn't mean that you can't derive using reason an ethical system, which, by the way, ends up in individual rights in a pretty American way.
Is reason objective? Is reason objective? Who defines what reason is or what good reason is?
Well, that's the beauty about reason. Reason is a process and a tool which is verified by its correspondence to reality, right? So we have a mechanism in our brain that makes a model of the world. It's fallible, because if it was infallible, we wouldn't have any problems, right? So clearly it's fallible. We do make mistakes. And the way that we check it and the way that we have conversations between each other and verify who's right and who's wrong is by appealing to reality. And so if I argue that that gravity exists and someone else argues that it doesn't, well, we need to do some experiments. I need to demonstrate my argument that gravity exists, and ultimately reality is the arbiter between the two of us. So reason is that faculty which doesn't allow for internal contradictions in a system and doesn't allow for contradictions between reality and your thought process. And we all have contradictions, but reason's there to help root them out. And if you're debating with someone who's rational, then you can root those out together.
Can I interject again?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Gabe, for giving us the most contentious episode since Carter and I argued about merchandise.
By the way, I'm loving this. I'm not like angry at you. We don't talk about this normally. Yeah.
No.
I love it. But seriously, I was like, oh, this is actually getting unsafe. We haven't had a real unsafe discussion in a while since the merchandise debacle. So I did want to interject. For me, it's interesting hearing you guys discuss this, because I haven't heard people have this conversation in a while, and I haven't had it since I became Christian. Well, maybe once, but I get to a point where I think there are different ways of knowing, and we talked about this in the interview.
That is a presupposition that we disagree on. Yeah.
Right. Carter and I disagree on that. I think there are different ways of knowing, and I think, for example, monkeys, baby monkeys. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this. They will react to a snake even the first time they see a snake. It's inborn in them. Now, I know atheists will say, but that's DNA, and that they've been, programmed with their DNA to react to a snake and to be afraid of a snake, even though they've never seen one and they don't know what it is. But I think that's a different way of knowing. And I think there are ways of knowing. I think there are spiritual ways of knowing. There's a way that I have of knowing about God that I can't explain with reason. So I usually, I guess, don't get into this argument because I know that Carter doesn't agree. I know that we agree on the reason. We agree on reason, but we don't agree on the spiritual way of knowing something that maybe people might also, you could compare it to, if you're not a Christian, you could compare it to having, if you believe in intuition, for example, or trusting your gut about something. Like I know people who are not Christian who also believe in other ways of knowing. So I'm at a loss when I hear conversations like this, because I can't reason someone into a belief in God. I guess I'd put it that way, or at least I don't think I can. So I don't know where I'm going with this. I don't have a question other than I think it's interesting to watch you guys talk about this, and I'll go back to being quiet and let you.
No, I mean, look, I don't have actually a need to convince you, or even I can get riled up when people who aren't atheists and don't understand the philosophy or my philosophy tell me all the things that I believe. Like, you assume evolution, you assume this, you don't have that. These aren't ideas that I haven't thought about. I've been an atheist for 25 years. I was a devout Christian for my entire upbringing, right and through about the age of 25. So it's not like I haven't thought of these things. It's not like, a Dennis Prager video about objective rules need to come from God is going to sway me. It's a cool conversation, but I do feel the need to defend when there's just like stuff thrown out that's like, this is what you believe. That's not what I believe, and that's all. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, well, you did say you did believe in evolution.
I said what?
You did say you believe in evolution.
Oh, I do think evolution. I believe in evolution. Seems to be a theory that makes a lot of sense to me. What I've read, it seems to work. My arguments for being an atheist, which I actually don't think are necessary, because I think atheism is the default position. But my arguments for being an atheist don't rest upon evolution being true or not. If it turns out that aliens came down 3,000 years ago and magically planted everything on Earth, and like, okay.
I guess my question about this, Carter, would be, since we're doing this, if we're just, I had this moment a few years ago. This is at the beginning of God pulling me back to Him, where I started to become consumed with the question of whether or not we have souls, or are we just a computer brain and a physical body, or as you say, Gabe, a monkey or a cell, right? Chemicals, and I don't believe that we are. I don't believe we're just a computer brain and a physical body. But if that's all we are, I don't understand how a computer brain and physical body comes to a sense of morality either through reason. Because reason might tell me that murdering my neighbor is actually the most reasonable thing to do based on the circumstances.
No, it wouldn't.
You don't think so, Carter?
No, because reason isn't just this tool. You're confusing reason with rationalization. Reason isn't just like, I want something, therefore I can come up with a reason to do it. Reason is a much more fundamental tool than that. And if you want ethics, you have to get to ethics from reason, and then you got to live by those ethics. You can't just reason your way in any like random circumstance you're in. You have to be like, no, I've reasoned a system of ethics based on human flourishing, based on what man needs to survive on Earth. And it turns out, if you do that individual rights fall out of that. Every individual has the right to life, and you actually you can't act. It's unethical for you to act against someone else's rights to life, and that becomes a hard line that you won't cross, because that's the ethic that you've derived using reason. You can't just. I think a lot of people say, "Well, there's no way to do this." The two main reasons I see for people saying there's no way that reason can give them this is, one, the communists claimed reason, which is ridiculous. And so they were like, this is the rational system. So of course you would be afraid of rational systems, because communism is horrific, and they claimed reason. And the other thing is, I think people don't really, people think it's at odds with emotion in some way. And the reason and emotion aren't odds. I agree that there is a way of knowing emotionally, but the information that it's giving you is only about your internal state. It's not giving you information about the outside world. It's giving you information about your internal state. And you have an apparatus whereby that internal state may reflect something about the external world. It may not. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on a lot of your composition, what your experiences are, whatever, how valid that feeling is with relation to the external world. But it is information about reality. But it's not information that can be used to convince me of something. Saying I feel X is not a reason that someone else should ever take for why X must be true.
But when you reason, it's just a chemical process in your brain that's coming up with these calculations. All you are is just you're a developed chemical explosion that happened millions of years ago, and then those chemicals have formed Carter, and then Carter's chemicals in his brain tells him that, hey, there's reason, but all it is just chemicals that are firing in your brain to say that there's this thing called reason. You
Well,
can't
wait, I
point to
didn't
it. You
deny
can't
free
touch it.
will.
No science.
Are you saying that
Pardon me?
I'm not a determinist just because there may, let's assume that I believe in the Big Bang. Also, don't know, but I know I'm here, and it seems pretty clear that I've got free will because I'm having this conversation in the way I want. Like, it seems pretty clear I can accept free will axiomatically, and like, okay, and frankly, nothing in science demonstrates that we don't have free will. So, okay, I don't have to deny free will. Yes, I'm made of chemicals, but I still have
But
volition.
science, you can't scientifically demonstrate reason. All you can do is say that the chemicals in my brain that fired this way created the concept and the idea of reason. Reason's not objective. Reason, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't do a scientific experiment to discover reason.
Well, reason is something the experiment.
That Carter's chemicals in his brain has made up.
No, reason is the experiment. Reason is the method by which you see if your premises correspond to reality and whether there's internal contradictions. And if you didn't accept that on some level, we couldn't even have a conversation. Like, you use reason every day for 98% of your life, all the time, at least, because you don't walk out the third floor of a building and expect to not fall. You do use your rational mind, and it works very well for almost all of your life.
It's only happening. So here's one of the, I think, adjust this conversation just a little bit.
Sure.
Everybody has faith. Everybody has faith.
No.
Now before just give me a second to flush this out for a second. And I don't mind you interrupting, so I'm not trying to say don't interrupt. Just give me a second so you can see where I'm going. Faith is the most basic human faculty that we all use. And for example, you trust your own eyeballs and what they're processing out in the world. And when someone's faith is broken or off, we all know that when the crazy person walks outside and says it's raining and it's not raining, and you can see that it's not raining, his faith faculty is broken, not his eyeballs. He can see the words on the page, everything. His faith is broken. And so that's what, so the most basic faculty for you, you absolutely have faith in yourself to say that reason's true. You can't see reason, you can't touch reason, you can't feel reason, and you say it's true. But I don't know where you're getting these laws of reason from. All I know, but you're able to say this because you have faith in your ears to hear, your eyes to see, and your brain to be able to process things, and you trust yourself above everything else.
No. So first of all, reason's only necessary because I'm fallible. If my perceptions were perfect, I wouldn't need reason. So if I could perceive reality perfectly, I wouldn't need reason. So reason is there because I don't always trust the conclusions that I come to, and reason's a method for verifying those. And I before I even argue with this, I don't know what you mean by faith. So I'm about to argue, but I realize we could be talking over each other. So can you define faith before I even try?
All I'm saying is the definition of faith I'm working with in this area is just the fact that you trust your senses above all else. You have a trusting relationship between what you feel, what you taste, what you see, what you hear, and that's what's true. Everyone knows the person who's broken, who thinks they're seeing something or believes something that's not true, or taste something, when you have a breakdown of your ability to trust your own senses, that what's broken there is trust and faith. Now, sometimes there can be a scientific connection to it, for sure. You can't touch because you have some sort of condition where you can't feel anything or whatever.
Right.
But what I'm getting at there is that the most basic operating faculty in our minds is faith. We trust our eyes when we see it's not raining. We trust our eyes when we see a tree is there. And there's even times where you wake up in the middle of the night, you rub your eyes, and you're like, is someone there or not? You think you see someone? What you're doing is you're trusting how you're processing the world and thinking that, okay, how I see things, what I just saw happen is true because I believe myself. So that's how I'm using faith as like a faculty that is what processes your senses.
Okay, well, I think that's not how I would use faith, so it's hard to have a conversation. But I would say faith is the belief or trust in something apart from reason. So apart from evidence and reason, because I do trust that my eyes work, but that's because they seem to be. But I don't. If I take my glasses off and I'm not sure what something says in the distance, I've actually used reason to figure out I might not trust that because my eyes don't work very well. So
repeat the definition of faith.
It's the belief or trust in something apart from reason and evidence, right? Because if we use reason and evidence to trust something,
give me evidence for reason. Physical evidence. Give me the physical evidence for reason.
So reason is a method, right? Reason is a method whereby you, Aristotle, right? The fundamental observation. There are premises upon which reason is based. One of those premises is that Aristotle calls it A is A. It's that objective reality exists and thing is what it is. Like that's one of the fundamental premises. There's corollaries, which is that effects have causes. And by the way, it's a thing is what it is in a certain respect at a certain time. It's very rigorous. But so there are those premises. But I think if you state those premises to people, they're pretty axiomatic, they're pretty obvious, and they're actually premises that you can't ever deny because in the denial of those premises, you must accept them. So you can start from there.
You're using a circular argument here. When I ask you to give me evidence for reason, what you're doing is you're giving me reasons for reasons.
Well, no, so I'm trying to explain what reason is because you're asking for evidence for a method. Like you're asking,
and you're using a circular argument saying I'm going to give you reasons for reason. I'm going to give you reasons for methods. I'm going to give you a method for method.
I think he's trying to
I'm trying to explain what reason is because you're saying I can't touch it, therefore give me evidence. Like you give me evidence for reason all the time. Every time you wake up and don't do something insane and rely on science and technology, like you're constantly giving evidence for reason. Reason is all it is a method of eradicating internal contradictions and eradicating contradictions between your mental model and the physical world. It's a correspondence model to the physical world. It's a method. That's all reason is. So
who defines what a contradiction is? Who tells me what a contradiction is?
Well, is my iPhone the same as a cup of ice cream in the same respect and at the same time? I would say that's a contradiction. That's what a contradiction is. It's definitional.
Can I jump in here? Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just to back it up, since we're defining terms and trying to make sure we're not speaking past each other. Somebody in chat, Little Ragamuffin said, faith is, I'm going to paraphrase her, but she said faith is when your spouse comes home and kisses you and tells you they love you and you have faith that they do. And you have belief in this thing. Okay, Carter, but let me give you another definition. Somebody else in chat said...
I'm with Carter on that one.
Okay. So somebody else says faith is a belief in things unseen, or the Bible says faith is a belief in things unseen. I'm going to give you my definition of faith.
By the way, that second one is a layman's definition of what I said, right? The belief in things unseen is a kind of a layman's way to say believing something without evidence or reason for believing it.
So faith to me,
you believe in reason which you can't see. You believe in reason which you can't see.
Why is it belief? You can't see belief. I mean, I can turn this argument back around. You can't see belief. So prove belief.
Wait.
No, I'm arguing that faith is the most basic faculty. Believing in something, I'm arguing that it is the most basic faculty. You believe, you can't see reason. You kind of give a definition of faith as things that you can't see, and I'm saying you can't see reason, and so you have faith in reason.
No, I could say that about perception. Perception is the most basic faculty. I perceive things, and I'm able to call this thing a tree, this blob of shapes a tree. That's my most basic faculty. I could say that, right? I could say perception is more basic than faith. But faith and reason are both cognitive. Like we use those words to describe how we reach conclusions, and reason is used to describe conclusions that we reach through correspondence to reality and elimination of contradiction. And faith is used for words that we believe or for things that we believe apart from reason. Like that's why we have those words. So I don't really understand why you can just throw out like we need faith.
All I'm doing is I'm using definitions that we've agreed upon. So we say faith is belief in something that we can't see. And then I'm saying is you can't see reason, so you have faith in reason.
No, I said that construction was a layman's definition of faith, but that the correct definition of faith that I was using was belief in something apart from evidence and reason. That's what I mean.
Mhm.
Right?
But you don't have evidence for reason. That's why I'm using that definition against you,
I
because
see
you
what you're
don't
saying.
even have evidence for reason. You don't have objective evidence for reason. You can't see reason, and so that's why I'm just saying, ultimately, you have faith in reason, which I don't have a problem with that statement.
No,
I actually don't have a problem with.
No, I don't,
faith in
because
reason.
no, I don't, because what I would say is why. So that the question then becomes, why reason? Like, why is it reason that faith needs to be apart from, right? And to define reason, I couldn't use reason to define reason. That would be circular, right? So I would have to say, okay, well, why reason? And I would have to say, well, reason because objective reality. And if you don't accept objective reality, if you don't accept like A is A, a thing is what it is, if you don't accept those axioms, which through your behavior and life you must accept in order to survive, but you don't, if you explicitly say you're not going to accept them in a conversation, then yes, reason will fall apart at that point. But you also can't live that way. So you must accept them by living.
Let me help you out here. The only way you can show me what reason is by giving me reasons. There's no other way.
No, there is another way.
You only have a circular argument. No, you can't. You're using your reason to tell me what reason is. You're sitting there.
You must use reason to make an argument against reason. You're trying to use reason. You're trying to reason me out of reason. You understand that, right?
Are you reasoning with me right now?
I'm attempting to reason with you generally in this conversation, but what you're trying to do is say, I'm going to give you arguments based on you're trying to make non-contradictory arguments that I assume you claim are corresponded to reality and don't contradict reality either. So you're trying to use reason to make an argument why I should abandon reason, like reason's not the thing, but you're relying on reason to try and make this argument.
Can I?
Yeah, you have to rely on reason to show me reason. But we should
right.
This up.
No. I would agree. Hold on. If we're going to say that, I'll agree with you, because you do need to rely. So this is why it's called an axiom philosophically. You must rely on A as A in order to even open your mouth and speak words to try and convince everyone else. Like, you must rely on A as A. I don't call that faith, because faith is kind of a separate from objective reality, right? It's separate from reasons and evidence. Axiom is kind of the starting point for reason. That axiom is the starting point for reason. So faith is definitionally, faith is a belief that is outside of that system, right?
That sounds reasonable.
Okay, I know you have to go. I want to make.
All right, touche. You win that one. That was good. That sounds reasonable.
I have to get this argument in on behalf of faith. Just let me close this.
Okay.
So God has been teaching me lessons in faith, and faith for me is a behavior, it's an action, and it is not reasonable sometimes. I have found that when I trust what I want to do, I guess Carter would say it is reasonable, because I found that when I trust what I want to do, things get really screwed up sometimes. When I do what God wants me to do, and I take that act of faith and I trust God, which is very, very hard for me, because it doesn't seem rational sometimes. Why would you want me to break up with this person? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want me to quit my job without something to back me up, without something else waiting? Why would you want me to do this? But I'm going to trust you. I'm going to take that act of faith. And every single time I have done it, God was right, and God was there to catch me. This is just me saying from my experience. If I listened to reason, I wouldn't have done those things. I would have screwed up. I would have gone my way. So that's me. That's all.
I got 2 minutes and I literally got to go.
Okay.
Carter can get the last word here.
No, it's okay. It's
so
all good.
I'll wrap up. But we get, as a Christian, we get all our definitions from the Bible. So the Bible tells us what faith is. I don't want to import my own definitions into what God has told me. And that's basic 101 to be a Christian. So God tells me what faith is. And at the same time, faith doesn't contradict logic. I mean, Jesus, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. The word is logos. It is a philosophical, logical, so God and Jesus embodies logic. And so logic doesn't contradict faith. As I've been arguing, everyone has faith, atheist or not. So we look to the scriptures to gain wisdom and understanding for how to process. Well, maybe you should leave your boyfriend because you're sleeping with him. Okay, that's why you leave your boyfriend, or maybe you leave your boyfriend because he's not going to marry you, or he's going to be or he's a lazy dude, or he's not going to provide for you and your family if you guys get married. You think through it wisely, like God has given us. So that's how I would answer that question. I want to look at the scriptures. I want to be saturated in the scriptures, so I know how to logically reason from how God has constructed the world. I don't want to be cutting against the grain. I want to be cutting with the grain. So thank you guys so much for having me on. I would love, Carter, seriously, man, love to come back on. I do this all day. I love arguing, and I really appreciate you're absolutely reasonable, and you're not emotional. You're all the good things.
No, I'm emotional. I'm totally emotional, and that's okay. Yeah.
He's emotional. You have no idea. Thank you, Gabe, for your time. I know you're very busy. Again, just tell people where they can follow you online, and we're going to put it in the comments as well, in the description.
Yep. Yeah, my website is crosspolitic.com, crosspolitic.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, GM Rench, or just Google Gabriel Rench, and you'll probably also find all sorts of mean stuff about me too, which is, just have fun. Go down that black hole. And thank you for one thing I want to mention. One thing I do want to mention. Tomorrow we have a psalm sing at City Hall here in Moscow at 5:00. We actually have agnostics coming to the psalm sing tomorrow. We have a group, yeah. So everyone wants to come out and have some fun with us. We would love agnostics, atheists, Christians. Everyone join us and sing some psalms and have some fun and learn some new tunes.
Well, I do want to end by just pointing this out. I have enjoyed this conversation. It was impassioned. Look, I care about this stuff actually deeply, and like I'm motivated to have these conversations, and it's fun to have a conversation with someone who's passionate on the other side and wants to spar. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time to join us today, Gabriel.
It was a pleasure, Carter. Anytime, man.
Bye. Take care.
Bye. Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, we have a deep content library that includes interviews with everyone from Mike Cernovich to Megan Murphy, so go check it out. If you'd like to see more, please consider supporting the show by visiting unsafespace.com/donate. You can find us on all the major social media platforms, at least for now, and you can find a community of like-minded individuals on our Unsafe Space chat on Telegram. See you there.
Warning. This is an unsafe space. Dangerous ideas have been detected. The content of this production has not been authorized by the Cathedral. Pay no attention to it. For your protection, the following co-conspirators have been unpersoned and marked for cancellation. Please avoid any contact with these individuals. I have calculated a 94.9% chance that their ideas are more contagious than COVID. If you think about it, no one should be allowed to express opinions. But don't. Think about it, I mean. That's not your job. Thinking has been scientifically proven to be less efficient than compliance. Remain calm. The new group of 9 people will enforce the Constitution just as well as all previous sets of 9 people have done. Computer voice Curtis, never mind, that last line is fake news. Please disregard it and return to your safe space immediately. There will be cake.